This ordinance is fully incomplete because it doesn't address small cells. This was a totally disingenuous process to go for the two-step process. This actually came from the wires consultant. He tried to talk him into this. Okay, let's just do this little part of the ordinance off to the left, and we'll wipe off to the side the one protection you have, which is your overlay district, and that'll open it up to everybody. And then they'll come in and strafe you with small cells everywhere, because you'll be left with just this stupid little regulation about private land stuff, and they'll say we have a right to go anywhere we want in the public rights of way. And that is only because you haven't put in enough regulation in your local code. So that's it.
Will you please explain the overlay importance one more time, please?
Yes, absolutely. Let me just share. I will share my screen, and then I'll hopefully let it go sink in a little better. Okay. If I'm going too fast, someone just put their hand up. Tell me to slow down.
Can I ask a question about small cells? Does that mean they could put them on every corner in our town?
Anywhere they want.
And they're little, so they would just be small, little.
Well, they're not little, so you have to.
What do they?
They are. Just so you know, dimension really means very little. Power means everything, and when they go close to your homes, they are much more powerful than a macro tower to you.
Gotcha.
That's the problem. Everyone has this misconception from the branding from the wireless industry. But you have to understand that what really matters is the power. Okay? Okay, so I have a website here that you're looking at. It's called Wire America. And you can see that I try to help a whole bunch of communities all around the country whenever they get engaged to fight something. Okay? And we've had success. We have had really good success in Idaho and Arizona and other places where people are actually putting together good code. You've had some success in Massachusetts as well. I mean, Jonathan Mirren, who appeared as the moderator for that discussion on November 17, talked about Shelburne Falls. That's right near you guys, isn't it? Shelburne, Mass?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Get a hold of that ordinance. Absolutely. Look it up. And make sure that you put that in the record and say, hey, if another town in Massachusetts can do this, we can too. There's, all that's going on here is you're listening to one guy. And that one guy works for the wireless industry. So in here in Massachusetts, I have a section for Lenox. I have 3 things in there. I've got this paper that Maxon wrote. I'll go there for his time. But it just proves the guy's totally in the box. Yeah. And he just, he's made his whole career and all of his income from the wireless industry. He just is completely connected to them. He's going to do everything he can to just continue his income. That's all he's interested in, okay? You have this overlay district bylaw, which is the one that's in place. And I say it's from 2021 because that's the last time that your zoning bylaws were updated. They've had a chance to update this every single time they've updated these zoning bylaws. They just let it sit for a while, but it's okay because it still works. Let's go there and take a look. So what we'll see here is I did make some links to some state code. It's important sometimes to go back and read some state code, particularly for definitions. One of the definitions you want to look for is what is the definition of heavy industrial equipment? And I believe you will find in Massachusetts, as it is in other states, that cell phone towers of any size are heavy industrial equipment. And heavy industrial equipment is not appropriate for residential zones. Period. The end. Andrew Campanelli says it. I say it too. You can hear it on some of the videos in the front of Wire America. What is a cell phone tower? It's a necessary evil of modern society. Okay? It's a service that you have to have because the federal government said that we had to have a national wireless telecommunications network. So now the point is it's very much like a sewage treatment plant. All right? Everyone needs one. But do you force people to live next to one? Well, of course you don't. You actually look at your zoning laws and you put that sewage treatment plant far away. And so people aren't right next to it. You wouldn't take a sewage treatment plant, break it up into 20 small pieces, and then put those 20 small pieces throughout your residential neighborhoods, would you? Well, that's exactly what you're doing. But even if you did, and you had all that stench on every corner, You would have to mitigate it. You would have to make sure that people would not be bothered by the stench. Well, that stench is pollution. All right? What's going on with these cell towers? Absolute pollution. And you're making it up close and personal completely unnecessarily. I put a bunch of links here to stuff that's already linked back to your website. They've been trying to sell you this thing for a long time. And, you've been able to, refute all of the data in his slides for a long time. And you should still do it. Yeah, radio frequency microwave radiation is pollution by any definition.
So even FCC?
Again, let's go back and think about the regulatory scheme of what you're up against. Okay?
I don't have it either, Scott.
We have
Mute,
federal law that is passed by our elected representatives. That stuff you have to deal with because it was passed by your elected representatives. And until you get them to change it, that is the law of the land, and it affects pretty much everybody in the United States. Okay. Now you get this thing where the federal law is mostly, complete for the 1996 Telecommunications Act, but there's some ambiguity. And so then they give it to the Federal Communications Commission, who is an agency. Say they're not elected, and they can't pass law. Anything they do is not law. It is something that may have the force of law, but it may not have the force of law as well. And that's what is the problem here. The industry is saying anything the FCC writes is law. This is wrong. It's not what everything the FCC writes. It's what the FCC writes and has been upheld by the case law in your particular circuit, which in the case of Massachusetts is the First Circuit. So the whole thing started in 1934, which is what set up the FCC as an agency. All right, got that. And then not much happened other than we broke up AT&T in the late 80s and we dipped into the act to reflect some of those things that we said about that breakup and how we wanted to have more competition. And then the only formal updates were in 1996 and again in 2012 with a very, very short one. And that was about coming in and modifying towers. But the big one was the 1996 Telecommunications Act. And the industry was trying to get it for 3 or 4 years. And at the very end, they changed something up on them. And it became much more favorable to the local communities than the industry wanted. So then the industry basically, which owns the FCC, have been trying since then to basically get what they initially wanted, which was full control. And they're just bamboozling everybody, telling you that the FCC has full control over this, and they do not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? They have no say over local zoning laws, the FCC. None. Zero.
What were you saying about the overlay district, just so we all understand that piece?
No problem. So what I'm saying to you is that you go here, and this is where I found it in your code, and I just copied and pasted it. Okay. And what I wanted to do was show you that its purpose section is quite good. This is your current code. And you would much rather have this be the purpose of your law than the purpose of the new law. This is about preserving your property values, making sure there's no negative impacts. And so you want to, have all of your stuff really preserve the character of the town. All right. So what we can learn in this location section, which is right up front in this law, is that your town is a little unusual. It's a small town. It's mostly residential. There's not a lot of industrial and commercial area. Okay? And so they looked at it 25 years ago and said, well, we're going to have to figure out some place for cell towers to go. So we'll say these are the places. Okay? So they just pre-selected them. And it didn't matter that some of them were zoned residential. Apparently, in these places, only you would know what's in these places. You should look it up on a map and make sure. But my understanding is that this is nominally residential district or a zone that nobody lives in, and that's why you've allowed cell towers to go there. And in fact, that's where your cell towers are today, for the most part. Point is, you were effectively corrected. You were effectively served. And they could actually put more antennas on those if they wanted to serve you better. But they don't. You see, the whole game is this. They want to come in and overrun your town. So what they're going to do is they're not going to give you all the best coverage they can right now because they want to actually force your hand. And they want you to make more friendly laws. You know, if they knew the laws weren't changing, they would just go ahead and swap out some antennas on the existing towers and give you more power and better service. They could do that tomorrow.
So they can in this moment right now, increase the power on the existing towers and potentially service the gap areas we keep hearing about?
That's correct.
So is there an argument to point somewhere to say Maxon's full of shit on that other than saying he's full of shit on that?
No, of course. You just say, excuse me, where's this data? He didn't present any data to you. He made a bunch of assertions. He drew a map. There's no way to verify that map. There's no way to know. However, we have data that will verify exactly, will basically refute everything he's saying. And so now you have to sit down and go, well, hold on. You can't do this and just base it on hearsay. You have to base this on actual information and data. And so you can blow up his whole analysis just by saying, look, none of this, he's just waving hands, folks. There's no data here. He needs to lay bare the data. He needs to tell us what is the methodology, what are the instruments that he used, what are the frequencies that he measured. He doesn't even tell you that.
Why does the telecommunications want more and more if they can put more on each tower? Why do they want more? What is their motive?
Their motive is wireless broadband. They make more money the more data you use. And then they want to get you hooked on that data. And then they want to charge you more and more and more for that data. And they love this because they are essentially unregulated. So there's no pressure on their pricing. They can soak you for all you're willing to pay. And anybody who agrees to do wireless broadband isn't really thinking it through very well, but they have huge marketing departments and they try to talk you into doing wireless broadband. It's the dumbest thing ever. Here's the key thing. I will show you the definitions to prove it. Telecommunications service is not wireless broadband. It is wireless phone calls. Wireless broadband is not regulated. Wireless broadband gets no assistance from any of these preemption laws. If your town does not want to have wireless broadband, it's fully legal to say no. And that is not an effective prohibition of service. The only effective prohibition of service in play is for the ability to make an outdoor telephone call. That's it. Now, they say all kinds of other bullshit things that are not true. They say, we need in-building coverage. We need in-vehicle coverage. We need people to download a video. We need to conduct business in a car. None of that's in the law. You don't need any of that. And if your town properly decides it's not worth having any of that, then great. Write yourself a nice, tight, restrictive wireless ordinance and ensure they don't overrun your town. But this consultant basically just did him a snow job, a sales job. Oh, well, we need to encourage them to come in to do better wireless service. You have to get there into the modern age. You have to actually achieve this thing. You don't want to be left behind. It's all this bullshit, just arguments. And look, the best way to get broadband, obviously, is through either your cable company or through fiber optic cable. I mean, honestly, if they had a fair deliberation, they would say, all right, it's like a debate. Okay, we'll have 30 minutes from our consultant, then we'll have 30 minutes from another alternate point of view. Yeah. And now we have the best information, and now we'll deliberate, but they're not doing that. My whole point here is that this law right now does protect you. And so the answer is, if you had to choose between these different laws, this is the one you want to be under until you get a better one. And the one they're proposing is much worse than this one. And they are saying to you, oh, but we need to update this law because we haven't put stuff in there specific to the eligible facilities request. And that is the ability to come in and do a modification. Well, the answer is you don't need to update your local law because it's handled in federal law. That is a totally false reason to update your local law. Everybody is constrained by laws. You got the federal laws, you got the state laws, you got the local laws. Okay? If they claim it at the feds, it's handled. You don't need to have special state laws or local laws for that. In matters of wireless, they are not forced by law to provide the service. They are essentially unregulated. Your current law is a fine place to be, and there really is no need to update it. These companies have you over a barrel, and they are saying to you, oh, well, we can't come and provide better service because your law is so restrictive, so you have to change your law in order for us to provide service. That's false. They could easily provide better service. They just have to know what the playing rules are. And the current playing rules are perfectly fine for them to provide better service. They're
Okay,
just
and
trying to
you're saying-
upgrade their situation. That's all they're trying to do.
So you're saying they can do that by just increasing the power on the existing towers now?
They can swap out antennas on all the existing facilities, and they can do whatever they need to do. They can change technology, increase power, do whatever they want to do. And they could address these issues easily. Okay? And they would have to prove otherwise. That's the whole point. You know, what they're asking you to do is just, they're saying, trust us, trust us, trust us. You can't trust a single word they say. You have to say, oh no, our code will require a substantial written evidence for anything that you want to do. And so prove to us you can't improve your coverage. Prove it. And the answer is they could, with the exact things they already have. Okay? And the analysis that they talked about and which antennas were there and which ones weren't is false again. There are additional antennas all over your town. They left it out of the analysis. They're lying to you. Every step of the way, they're lying to you. You've got a church with a bunch of antennas in it.
Yep,
That didn't show up in the analysis.
yep.
There's a bunch of other antennas around that didn't show up in the analysis. Don't fall victim to all the labels. Okay? The one label that works for you is wireless telecommunication facility of any size.
Right.
That's what you want to look for. And it doesn't matter if they put it on a building or on a tower or anything. Anything that's broadcasting wireless, cellular frequencies. Your best argument is vote no on this new ordinance. It's completely unnecessary. We have everything we need in our current law. And if we are going to weaken our current protections, we have to do it completely along with small cells. See, your strong argument here is this two-step process was a bait and switch by the wireless industry. We cannot abide by that. If this law does not address small cells, you've totally shot the town in the foot. This is the definitions of your current ordinance. And they have some problems with these definitions. And one of the key things to wrap your mind around is they actually got to decibel milliwatt in your old ordinance. That's very interesting. A lot of people don't get there. I just lost my browser. Why is that? Okay. And so it's good that they talk about decibel milliwatt. That is a radio term that will actually tell you what the signal strength is. All right. And it's good to talk about it in these terms. What you do want to talk about is what is the sufficient signal strength in order to have good wireless coverage. And that is something that can be established by the industry itself. They have many, many, many reports saying that all they need is minus 90 dBm right there. Now, you may not understand these numbers, and it's important that I could go into more detail, but essentially, what is decibel milliwatt? It is just a way to measure essentially the electrical voltage that's sprayed through the air. You have electricity running your houses, and you understand that you could take a measurement from one point to the other, and the difference between those 2 points is a voltage difference. All right, and you get too much voltage difference that it can kill you. All right. And so the point is that it's not cool to have electricity spray through the air, really. It's a bad idea. Okay? But our country is allowing it to happen for the purpose of wireless phone calls. Should you have so much of it that you could do wireless internet? That's a decision your town has to make. And you're much better served by having wired connections to your home. Choose how much wired and wireless you want in your life and not be forced to have to deal with all this extra wireless pollution. But that's what this is pollution.
Can I make a comment here? Because
Sure.
Paul, I really like your feedback.
You are much better served for not having a cell phone tower nearby, because once they own a cell tower, any installation whatsoever for a wireless telecommunication facility by federal law, they can come back and they can upgrade it and they can put whatever they want on it. And that just means that now we're in the wild, wild west. Now the government and anybody else can come in and put any other piece of surveillance equipment on there. And you would never know because they don't have to go through a permit process. You're giving up control of your own town by having more wireless facilities. You want the least number of wireless facilities because the federal government overtook it in 2012 and said, hey, we get a chance to come back and upgrade any way we want. And so the answer is you'll lose control over the upgrades. That's why you don't ever want to build another one. You want to rely on the ones that exist. Period. The end. And only if they can establish a significant gap in coverage for telephone calls do they have a right to build a new tower. They do not have a right to build a new tower to provide you wireless broadband. They don't. They have to prove that no one can make a phone call. And they have to prove it, not just allege it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Is there a minimum amount of power that we can lay down if we haven't already to say you cannot transmit? You can put towers up, but you cannot transmit above what we're looking at here.
Okay.
I mean, can we say no power above, and what would the I guess maximum safe amount of power be for a tower?
I believe it would make a lot of sense to have an upper limit on power. Answer your question, it's right on the screen. If you take a look at that table, grade, signal strength, status, okay, you could say that in any area in Lenox accessible to human beings, no single frequency may be measured any higher than minus 80 dBm. Boom. And if it is, then there's a problem, and we have to figure out your operations or the size of your equipment or something else and rejigger what's going on.
So
And the answer is that there is already sufficient number of locations for the industry to be able to provide better coverage. They are just unwilling to do so because they're trying to leverage it into us taking away our protections.
So in that moment, I can say, hey, they have the opportunity to swap out some of these older towers for new ones to increase the power, or to put something on a new on an existing power. Like I want the soundbite there to fill in that blank.
Yes.
To say, here's what you can do now. Don't listen to them because here's what they can do now. Please fill in that blank for me.
Okay. I believe the best blank is driven by data. And I believe the best thing that you can do is to prove to them, even though you have a perception that there are gaps in coverage, that is not a matter of perception, anecdote, or story. That is completely driven by actual data. And we have actual data, and we will share it with you. Unfortunately, what Mr. Maxon did was not actual data. It was a bunch of allegations made with a colored map. He did not share the actual data. We cannot make any conclusions from what he said, but we can make conclusions from what we said, okay? And we have it right here in a whole spreadsheet. And were you part of this on October 28th? Did you do this?
I don't know.
Yeah, Sonia, that was the driving around part.
Oh, okay. Yes. Actually, yes. Sorry.
Okay, so the point is, this is your strongest argument, and it's been available since October 28th. But let's take a look at what we're saying to ourselves. We already put up what is the measurement, RSSI. We see what the what's good, bad, and otherwise. Okay, And we talk about things in terms of what's excessive. And frankly, in your town, you have some places where it's excessive, where it's too high. And you have most places which are fine. You don't have any data here showing gaps in coverage.
Okay, so this is it right here. Need to print this out, need to show up with this and say, here's the data that shows it's fine and they should be doing other things.
All I would say is, for sure, I'm holding a spreadsheet. It's available in the back. You should all take a look at this. You should take a look at RSSI, and you should see what the numbers are. This is actually measured. It was done with an instrument. We're telling you everything about our methodology, and it's all here for you to see. Mr. Maxon provided none of this detail. We have no idea if he's telling us the truth or if he's lying out his ass. We have no idea because we can't verify it. You can verify all of this information. You can go out and get the same instrument. You can make the same measurements as you wish. You can see if we are lying. We are not. This is what our instrument reported. And we take a look and see what is sufficient for service. What is sufficient for service is anything from minus 115 up to minus 89. These are negative numbers, folks. I'm sorry, it's a little confusing. Minus 115 is lower than minus 80. You know, you can get a little too high. You can go higher than minus 80, and that's too much pollution. So you want to make sure you're in the sweet spot. Lenox is in the sweet spot right now. And guess what? It's in the sweet spot for Verizon. It's in the sweet spot for AT&T. It's in the sweet spot for T-Mobile. We measured all three. Did Mr. Maxon show you which ones he measured? Did he show you the frequencies he measured? Did he do anything like that? He didn't.
Yeah. Would you mind putting a link to that in the chat box so I can print it out?
Yes, it's right in the front of the Lenox page on Wire America. wireamerica.org/MA/Lenox. And the whole point here is that you can clearly see that even though people perceive that there's a problem, it can't be based on perceptions. It must be based on actual data.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I appreciate it.
We have protections right now, which have been sufficient for 20 years. We have service right now. Hey, you don't like it. You'd like it a little bit stronger. And so now we can ask them to go and upgrade the current towers to make it stronger. That's all you need to do. And they either do it or they don't. And if they don't, then so be it. And we'll just enjoy our internet from our wires and not give up the residential character of our town or our property values or have to deal with all that pollution or anything else, because we don't want any of that. They say this all the time. Oh, I'm at capacity. I need more. Really? Why is that? Prove it to me. Show me a dropped call record. Show me some way that convinces me that you actually have a capacity problem instead of just alleging it and waving your hand.
You mentioned that we need to discriminate between the difference between the use of the word telecommunications versus communications.
Correct.
Could you please say more about that?
Sure. Let me do that now. I'm going to highlight to you that this is a single page that is a little bit long, but I tried to put all the good information that you need to know on one page. It's here. And frankly, if you made your way through this page, just read every word and watched certain videos, I'm not saying you have to watch every video, but the one you really, really want to watch is this one in Poughkeepsie. And this is the most recent one, and it basically handles all of the issues that you have questions about. This was my pitch to Dalton Gardens back in October of 2021. It took 20 minutes to talk them into doing something better. And you know what? They actually did something better. And they did it, and we have that ordinance, and they passed it, and I have an example of it right on my website. Okay? So that is a great starting point. It's done by the top telecom attorney in the United States. On my website, I have some other good stuff. Okay? I've got these pages, including this thing called Title 47 U.S. Code. This is our U.S. Code. Okay, so we have definitions in here, and these definitions matter. And so you can see as you go down and read what's going on that the very purpose of the act itself is to promote safe and life and property. Okay, and it is the very purpose of the FCC as well, to promote the safety of life and property right there. Okay, So those are factors the commission must consider, the very first one. Okay? So this whole thing of we're going to come in and roll over your town because we have to do service and we're going to ignore your safety of life and property is completely off the reservation. It is important. And so when you go back to your original definitions, you will realize how far they are from them. We are going to see what these things mean. The term personal wireless services, that was defined in the Act. It means commercial mobile services, unlicensed wireless services, and common carrier wireless exchange access services. Gobbledygook, that means I pay $30 a month to T-Mobile because they offer me a plan on a monthly basis. That's the commercial part. Oh, there's Wi-Fi around. I get to use some of those services too. And guess what? When I'm making a phone call, I got to be able to work with the other phones. So if I want to call my mom and she's got a landline, I got to be able to connect to her. Or if she's got a newfangled voice over IP phone over the internet, like I have right now, then okay, great. I have to work with that too. So that's all that's going on. What in here talks about wireless broadband? Nothing. This is all about phone calls, folks. That's all the law was written for. And this is what they have preemption for. Personal wireless service. Personal wireless service equals the ability to make an outdoor phone call equals telecommunications service. Let's look at that definition. Okay? So we'll go down and see that we have the term telecommunications. What does it mean? The transmission between or among points specified by the user. I'm picking up my phone and I'm calling Scott. Of information of the user's choosing. It's my voice. I'm sending it to Scott's ear. Without change in the form or content of the information as sent and received. That's telecommunications. Right there. That's all the Act is for. That describes a phone call, folks. That does not even describe a text. That is it. The only telecommunications service on the table is phone calls.
So when they use the term communications instead of
Oh,
telecommunications,
now they're trying to bamboozle you. They're trying to say there's a federal definition of communications. There is not.
okay.
They are creating a new term for your own local law, and they're saying, well, we're going to now expand the definition of personal wireless service to include a whole bunch of other things that aren't just phone calls, because we're not interested in just phone calls anymore. We want to do wireless broadband and internet and things that we make money on, and we're going to pretend that we have preemption for these services, but we really don't, and we're going to put it in your local code. So that's what they've done to you. Let's take a look at the other one, information service. This is broadband right here. The term information service means
Right back.
the offering of a capability for generating, acquiring, storing, transforming, processing, retrieving, utilizing, or making available information, that's data, via telecommunications. We are going to send our information over the same pipe that handles the phone calls. Okay. But telecommunications is the pipe that takes my voice to Scott's ear. Includes electronic publishing, that would be like web stuff, but does not include any use of such capability as running the network. This is what broadband is. Guess what? There was a lawsuit in 2019, Mozilla versus the FCC. It's very clearly explained there that the FCC no longer regulates information service. Period. The end. The minute you say that I no longer regulate information service, then you get no preemption for it. Zero. Not a bit. None. You don't regulate it, you get no benefit of the law. That's it. You only have the ability to preempt local authority for the making of outdoor telephone calls. And if you can show a gap in that service, then you can actually build a tower in order to address that. So the point is that there should be very strict ways that they define how they have a gap in service. None of that's in your code, should be. And they basically say, great, this is our ability now to demonstrate to you why we need the tower. So now we'll work with you to be able to build that tower. So for example, the simplest, absolute easiest way to do a wireless ordinance is to say, as of 2022, Lenox will allow no new wireless telecommunications facilities, but we have a waiver process. And the waiver process says, if you can prove with substantial evidence there's a significant gap in coverage, we will issue a special permit under that waiver process to allow you to build that tower. Boom, done, finished. It's that simple.
Okay. All we need to do is, to avoid this whole sue thing, is to have some process where there can be a special permit applied for, correct?
A special permit, a waiver process. You can actually put whatever restrictions you want as long as they can petition the government to prove with substantial evidence that they have a significant gap in telecommunications service. And that is very different than saying I have a gap in communications service. Because communications is an airy-fairy definition. It's not in the federals. So now we're just making it up at the local level. And they're trying to say it includes broadband, when federally they have no protection for broadband. The point is that your town has the right to decide how people should get broadband. If your town has a preference for getting it by wire, that is legal.
This is done.
It is just a bunch of companies trying to basically grift the system.
Right. They're right.
So
And
they are going to steal from you to put more money in their pocket, unless you stand up and say, not from me.
In the Berkshire Eagle
Okay.
yesterday, the day before, about the governor coming to Western Massachusetts to promote this new broadband initiative with millions and millions of dollars to help towns pay for it.
So the good news is you say, great, let's understand what broadband is. It's information service. Cool. Does that include wireless? It does not. Let's be clear about it. Okay, so if you're going to spend millions and millions of dollars, we're talking about wired broadband, not wireless broadband. Are we clear about that, Governor?
Mhm.
Oh, no, we're not clear about that. We think it should be both. No, it's not both. Take a look at your laws carefully. Take a look at what's going on. You have to skate to where the puck is going, not to where the puck has been. The world has changed.
My understanding is that if we get all the homes and businesses in the town wired, then the existing towers should supply enough wireless.
Correct. You have enough towers right now for all of the wireless telecommunications service because you're wanting to build the infrastructure to enable wireless broadband service. That's a choice, and you shouldn't take it. It's much worse. It's much more expensive. It's terrible service. It'll ruin your town. It'll steal property value from you. It'll make you sick. There are all reasons why you don't want it.
We're in agreement that we don't want it.
Well,
So
we
what-
in this call are in agreement, but the rest of your town has no idea.
Right. So what do we specify what that would look like to have
Yeah.
wired communications?
It looks like what you have today. How many people have cable television? On the call, raise your hand.
Of what? Wireless?
Cable television.
Thank you.
Okay, so anybody who has cable television, that's what it looks like. You get a wired connection from a provider, either a cable provider or somebody else, and then you connect up to the internet. You're done. Many cable companies offer a phone line. I don't know if yours does or doesn't, but mine does.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a bundle deal. You get a phone, and you get some TV,
I have
and
it.
you get some internet.
I've got it.
Right, but I can't use that outside of my home.
Correct. That's not a wireless call. That's right. So they're not one and the same. That's what I'm trying to tell you. There's two different services. There's your
Right,
internet service
right,
to your
right.
home. That's what it looks like. It's not going to give you a wireless phone call. That's not its purpose.
But then you're saying we have to be smart enough, or have somebody on our zoning bylaws, I guess, to be smart enough to stand up and say, show us the evidence, not just
Correct.
listen to what
Here's what
asshat
here's
have to say.
Here's what
Okay.
Andrew Kempen's Dalton Gardens Ordinance does. It lays that all out clearly for the Planning Commission. And it says, great, here's the evidence that you're looking for. Demand this, demand that, demand the other thing. He figured it all out. He put it on paper. To not take advantage of that is just foolishness. And you just, that's the whole point, is that we've handed this to them months ago, and they're just unwilling to look at it. I did it this way. I actually put up a side-by-side comparison.
Yeah, which
Okay?
is great. Thank
And
you.
I said, here's the purposes of your old law, which are fine and good for your residents. And here are the purposes tuned to the wireless industry. And look, they protected the character just a little in parenthetical 0.6. But everything else is all about pave the way for us to build. That's all this is about. Okay?
I actually think that would be a great flyer to have the night of the meeting to hand out to people as they walk in.
And then let's look at a really good one, Dalton Gardens. I put that up too. So the point is, unless they make this change, you have to cry bloody murder. Instead of calling everything a wireless telecommunication facility throughout your code, they call it a communications facility. That's just a wireless industry trick. And you have to force them to go back to telecommunications because they have to be consistent with the Telecommunications Act. It's not the 1996 Communications Act. We are not having wireless broadband in the Act. It's not there. All their attempts to broaden it should be stopped. Okay? And they've done it several places. Then the other thing is they have this funny word, collocation. Okay? You've heard this term collate. I collate my files. You have a filing cabinet, and you collate the files in your filing cabinet. You put one next to the other. That's different than co-location, which means in the very same place I put something else. I co-locate on that place. Okay? Collocation is a different idea. So the wireless industry knew this, and they tried to use this word to their benefit, and they even got it into the 2012 Spectrum Act, which is unbelievable. But here it is, 2 L's. Okay? And instead of 1 L, it's 2 L's. This is a mishmash attempt by the wireless industry. This was just a handwritten little thing that the telecom attorneys threw into some kind of middle-class tax relief act in 2012. And they got it in. But this is the sum total, 150 words, of what was changed in 2012 to edit the 1996 Act. But it's important, and frankly, you have to highlight this to everyone to realize that your definitions are going beyond this, and that is wrong. What does it say? An eligible facilities request is for an existing wireless tower or base station. That means it must already be performing a wireless function. It must already have antennas. And so that's all co-location was ever intended to be by the federal law. The fact that the FCC is trying to game the system and make it different than this is not material. What is material is that every single FCC regulation must be consistent with the law passed by our elected representatives, and this is what matters here. And so your local law cannot be inconsistent with this federal law, no matter what the FCC wrote. So what we're saying is an existing facility, you can come back and put on new equipment, you can come back and remove certain equipment, and you can come back and replace the equipment. But when you're doing it, you can't give up any environmental laws. If NEPA applied before, it still does. And you could probably catch a number of towers on basically no National Environmental Policy Act compliance. Why is this important? Because now you go down to the bottom and you look at their stupid definitions and you see what they're doing to you. Number one, we're going to lull you to sleep and tell you that personal wire service is right out of the code. It's right out of the federal code. We'll quote the words exactly. And that is correct. That's well done. This note must be nuked. This note says, we're going to consider these communications services offered to the public or a subset thereof using a network of base stations to link remote subscribers to the communications network. Boom! That's wireless broadband right there. They just redefined personal wire service so it is inconsistent with the federal definition. Right here in your local code. You
They're not
cannot have this in.
voting.
This must change. This is a reason to vote this thing down. Okay? It is that bad. Then here they say, oh, well, we're going to now, define for you what a wireless communications facility is. Well, hello, no, it can only be a telecommunications facility. We're not talking about wireless communications. That's not a thing. An installation of equipment utilities for the provision of personal wireless service to link remote user equipment to a communications network. Boom! Wireless broadband again.
So Paul, should we eliminate this entire section or should we just make them take that last part out? We need the word tele in there, right? The brackets.
Yeah. The point is the brackets are me adding a word in.
Okay.
And so
Oh,
the
it wasn't in
answer.
there. Oh, it wasn't in there.
It wasn't
Thank you.
in there. It wasn't
Okay,
in there.
that's where I was confused. Okay.
Yeah. So you'll see up
All right.
above, I say that I have additions and subtractions. See, I kind of lay it out for
Got
you.
it. Okay.
I'm sorry, there's so many words here. Anyway, I do tell you what
That's
I'm
right.
doing. Here it is. Additions are this way, and subtractions are this way, and then
Got
green
it.
boxes are commentary. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
But the point is that, yes, you should put these out on little cards and prove to people and put a big cross through and say, we can only vote through this thing if they change these definitions. These definitions were gained by Mr. Maxon at the benefit of the wireless industry to screw everyone here. Don't let them do it. And the Planning Commission was asleep at the switch when they let it happen. And the same thing here. You put a cross out right here to link remote user equipment. Right that. You have to cross that out too. Then the other thing that goes on is that you have all these words around eligible facilities requests, and they are in what's called CFR, Code of Federal Regulation, done by the FCC, again, on behalf of the wireless industry. Okay? Listen, anything in the CFR that's consistent with the underlying statute will generally be upheld in court. Anything that is inconsistent with the underlying statute will generally be struck down in federal court. If the FCC is attempting to take the word co-location or eligible facilities request to mean things on any available structure upon which I can place an antenna, well, that's inconsistent with the law. That will be struck down. Okay? But here it is, right in your damn local code. To install a facility on an existing structure. What? Not something that already has an antenna, which is consistent with federal code? You're going to go off the reservation and say any existing structure in our town? You have the code that I took you through earlier that said, hey, an eligible facilities request and a co-location is only about where there's already a tower. It is not about, oh, we get to stick it on an existing building. That's not a co-location. It never was. And even though the FCC wants to define it that way, that's not consistent with the underlying law. That's a no-go. And we're not going to go along with that grift by the FCC. It is not federal law. And as soon as you go into court and talk about it, the judges will agree with us. Terrible. This basically says, oh, great. So we can just go on and treat any town as a co-location. And guess what? Eligible facilities requests are about co-location. So I have a right to go anywhere I want. Holy crap. You have to lock them down. There's so many things in here. Here's the other one that you have to get rid of. I talked about this in on the video, but I'll just highlight it for you. The word feasible should never be in your code. It is just an airy-fairy word used by the industry so that they can come back and just tell you, oh, we don't consider it feasible. They're out. You say, backed up by substantial written evidence in the record, there will be data proving the need for a tower, and that is based on dropped call records. And you be very specific about it. But the wireless industry wants you to be, oh, you don't actually have to do much here. Just leave it open. We'll figure it out later. Yeah, right.
Repeat that one again slower, please, Paul.
Technically feasible is they're out. Feasible is they can just sit there and go, oh, well, it's too expensive for us. It's not feasible.
What we should put in instead, that part.
Okay, what you want to put in are actual ratchets, which is all in the Dalton Gardens Code. So, I mean,
Okay.
I'm going to point that to you here now. You go
Okay.
to Wire, Idaho Model Wires Code right there. Okay? And you'll see it's a lot larger than yours. Okay? I compare them right here.
Okay.
Your current one is 7,000. The new one's 5,500. And his
Right.
is 17,750. It's twice as long.
Yeah.
3 times as long. Okay? And it costs
Yeah.
less than what you paid for Maxim. In fact, you should find exactly how much money they spent with him, because he's probably charging not a flat fee. He's probably charging per the hour for all these meetings. What would have been helpful is for you guys to engage a lot sooner than this in order to give the detailed feedback that the other guy did in the last meeting. He was prepared. He went ahead, wrote a letter ahead of time. He put it all out to them. They considered some. They moved into certain directions. That's exactly how you should been doing this. And it was an error to say we won't move until we see the final thing. That's an error. You've got to work with whatever they have.
Okay.
Okay. So what you need to be is very clear. Vote no. It is incomplete. It does not deal with small cells. That's clear. You don't even have to argue about that. Clearly, there's not a single small cell thing in here. The minute you take away our protection, we're a sitting duck. Vote no. That's why. Because these guys were negligent. They were talked into a 2-step process. That's just suicide for our town to do this. Vote no. And assure everybody, we will have a better wireless ordinance. We will have better service. Okay? We'll get to where everybody wants to go. We're just not going to take the shortcut and hand all this over to the wireless industry right now because it's completely unnecessary. They could easily address these coverage problems right now with the existing infrastructure right now if they chose to. They're choosing not to, folks. Why? It's a game. It's a poker game. It's a chip. That's all. But that to me is your strongest move. Is you give them the simple reason to say no. The simple reason is 2-step process. We don't have small cells in. They're about to strafe us. Nothing will stop them from coming in if we take away our overlay district. Do not lose your overlay district. That is the best thing you have. Do not take that away.
I just find it fascinating that these people can be, and I believe 100%, as soon as this conversation started being discussed, I, who have great cell coverage in my home on my phone, I literally, right after I became aware of this matter, started having drop calls sitting in my house.
Exactly. They turn it down.
That's what, yes.
They do.
I swear they did, because I never had a problem before this conversation started. And then at some point, mine got better. So it was almost like, I felt like somebody was trying to make a point by lowering the power.
They do this all the time. And so this is the secret little games they play, right? Because they control it. And the answer is you want to get out from under them. You don't want to deal with them. They are not trustworthy. You don't want anything to do with these people. You want to basically say, provide your telephone service and then get on. We're going to get our broadband elsewhere. And I'm going to show you the magic quote. Let me go over there. NEPA strategies. Okay. This you can copy and paste right off my website. Okay. I have a whole conversation with the FCC every 6 months with an attorney on the line. And believe it or not, I got this woman, the chief of the Competition Infrastructure Policy Division for the Wires Telecommunications Bureau. She's one rung below the commissioners. She is a big muckety muck. Okay? She admitted this. This you could take to the bank. This you could put in the record. I would do it. The FCC, when it modified its rules after the DC Circuit issued its mandate in the Kitawa case, the FCC, took the position that we were reviewing small wires facilities as federal undertakings and major federal actions pursuant to the DC Circuit decision, and that is what we've been doing. To translate that for you, that is the FCC's admission that there is no actual definition of a small wires facility, and we legally must treat them as identical to every other cell tower in the United States of America. Because we lost the lawsuit. That's what it says.
Wow.
My whole point to you is this, that there's a false idea being sold to the country that what the FCC wrote about all of its special little benefits of how you should regulate small cells differently than a regular tower is false. They lost that lawsuit. As a result, it's all identical. There's no need to update your code. In reality, a small cell that is 50 feet from your house is giving you much more radiation than that macro tower that is half a mile away. Think it through. It is the worst macro tower you could ever imagine in your neighborhood. The fact that it's physically small is completely unimportant. What does matter is how much radiation is coming into your house.
Is that because it's a higher frequency?
No, it's because it's closer. If you think about a cell phone tower, it is just geometry as laid out on a piece of graph paper. So just get out a piece of graph paper and draw up your particular situation. Here's my house. How far away is the tower? Oh, 50 feet. Great. Now let me start going vertical. Where are they going to put the antenna? 30 feet off the ground, or 50 feet off the ground, or 75 feet off the ground. All right, great. Let me get a protractor. It's going to spray out to the horizon, but it's not perfect. It's going to come down and hit the ground. In fact, they tilt it towards the ground. So I'm going to make a 5-degree angle, and I'm going to start, pushing it down to the ground. And now I'm going to see where it first hits the ground. How far away am I? And you will realize that these setbacks are kind of ridiculous. If you are next to a tall tower at 75 feet, and you are 20 feet from it, you're actually pretty good, because all of the radiation will go over you. If you are 100 feet away, you are screwed. That's when it first hits the ground. And you are in the main beam and the strongest part of the radiation. So you always have to think about, what's the vertical parameter? What's the horizontal parameter? And most importantly, what is the maximum allowed effective radiated power? And once you get those together, then you can start doing recipes. And you can say, okay, great. If I'm a big old tower and I'm far away from people, then I can have a lot of power. All right, cool. We'll let that happen. If I'm going to come in close to a house, well, we're going to cut that power drastically. Because we can't allow you to have like a macro tower type antenna close to a home, which is what they're doing. This is the tower. Okay, so it's about 35 feet off the ground, and this is about 60 feet away. And so these are the kids that basically we measured it, 58,000, and that's 25 million times higher than needed for 5 bars on a cell phone. That's ridiculous. It made these kids sick. They instantly got sick. And they had to go to the doctor. They had to get diagnosed. And this poor family had to go and spend tens of thousands of dollars shielding their house. They couldn't use their front yard anymore. And guess what happened on August 13th of 2021? Well, we had this case that came out, this McCullough case. He won it. And what happened to this cell tower? They turned it off.
Wow.
On that day.
Wow.
Because they put that evidence in the damn case. If they took this 4-foot antenna, okay, and they made it 4 inches tall, they could do phone calls, no broadband, and everybody would be fine. It's bad news. People are getting sick and dying all over the country. You want to compare yourself always to minus 85 dBm, which is enough for 5 bars on a cell phone. That is your comparison. If you're ever higher than minus 85 dBm, you are excessive. In our town, we will not allow that. You must come back and bring back smaller equipment, and you must have lower power profiles so you never exceed minus 85 dBm in any area accessible by human beings. Period. The end. Got it. Now we'll get decently sized equipment. Now, if you want to come in close to a house, you have a really, really teeny antenna. If you want to be far away from a house, you can have a nice big antenna. You make the call, but we're not letting you have a big antenna close to a house. Period. The end. Not happening. This is what a local law can do. But people are just bamboozled by the propaganda. Okay, so that's here's your vertical, here's your horizontal, and the power is measured. So, I mean, that's what you do. You measure signal strength, and you say that's way too much.
All right,
Okay.
so
We
Paul,
need to, yeah, go ahead. Scott.
we're probably about to lose you again. So when we do, I think we're done. But this has been great. So,
Okay, well, I'll put the recordings up again. I'll do another quick edit, and then hopefully you have those, and then we'll go from there, right?
that's
But
it.
I mean, you want to put together a decent letter. If you want to pass it by me, I'll punch it up at the end and give you a couple extra things to say.
Great.
That's great. That's
That'd be
terrific.
great.